μεταναστευτικό προσφυγικό και οι πρόσφατες ανθρώπινες τραγωδίες στη Μεσόγειο βρέθηκαν στο επίκεντρο της δεύτερης διάσκεψης Προέδρων Κοινοβουλίων της Ένωσης για τη Μεσόγειο που πραγματοποιήθηκε στη Λισαβόνα. Στη διάσκεψη μετήχαν 23 από τις 28 χώρες μέλη της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης, χώρες του Μεσογειακού Νότου και χώρες της Βόρειας Αφρικής. Οι πρόεδροι των κοινοβουλίων συμμετείχαν σε συζήτηση με θέμα μετανάστευση, άσυλο και ανθρώπινα δικαιώματα στην Ευρωμεσογειακή περιοχή, κατά την οποία τέθηκαν επιτάπητος οι πρόσφατες τραγικές εξελίξεις στη Μεσόγειο, οι επιχειρήσεις διάσωσης προσφύγων και η ανάγκη για μια ανθρωπιστική και δικαιοκρατική προσέγγιση της μετανάστευσης και των προσφυγικών ρευμάτων. Ουσιαστική συμβολή στη διαμόρφωση της τελικής διακήρυξης που υιοθετήθηκε είχε η Πρόεδρος της Βουλής των Ελλήνων. Κατόπιν παρέμβασής της περιλήφθηκε ειδική αναφορά σύμφωνα με την οποία η καταπολέμηση της εμπορίας ανθρώπων δεν επιτρέπεται να γίνεται με παραβίαση των ανθρωπίνων δικαιωμάτων, με διακύβευση της ανθρώπινης ζωής ή με παράπλευρες απώλειες, υπογραμμίζοντας την ανάγκη σεβασμού της αρχής της μη επαναπροώθησης, του δικαίου του ασύλου και των εγγύσεων του κράτους δικαίου. Την παρέμβαση της κυρίας Κωνσταντοπούλου υποστήριξε η πρόεδρος του Ιταλικού Κοινοβουλίου, κυρία Λάουρα Μπολντρίνη, και υιοθέτησε ομόφωνα η διάσκεψη. Στην παρέμβασή της, η Ζωή Κωνσταντοπούλου τόνισε ότι τα κοινοβούλια πρέπει να αναλάβουν πιο ενεργό ρόλο από αυτόν της παρατήρησης και της εξαγωγής συμπερασμάτων, επισημένοντας, μεταξύ άλλων, ότι κατά την πάταξη της διακίνησης ανθρώπων δεν πρέπει να μπαίνουν σε κίνδυνο ανθρώπινες ζωές και πως η παραχώρηση ασύλου δεν είναι πράξη ελεημοσύνης, αλλά διεθνής υποχρέωση και θεμελιώδες ανθρώπινο δικαίωμα. Η ξενοφοβία και ο ρατσισμός πρέπει να καταπολεμηθούν, υπογράμμισε η κυρία Κωνσταντοπούλου, υπενθυμίζοντας ότι η λογική της μηδενικής ανοχής και της Ευρώπης φρούριου εξέθρεψε και διόγκωσε αυτά τα φαινόμενα. Επίσης, η πρόεδρος της Βουλής επεσήμανε ότι το κανονιστικό πλαίσιο του Δουβλίνου έχει αποτύχει παταγωδώς και ότι η αναθεώρησή του αποτελεί επιτακτική ανάγκη.
Thank you very much, Mrs. President, not only for hosting this meeting, but also for choosing this very important topic. Thank you also to the keynote speakers for putting the accent on what should be important for parliaments, which is human rights, human lives, human dignity. Parliaments need to do more about the humanitarian emergency, very well pointed out by the Speaker of the Italian National Assembly. Parliaments need to do more than observe the failures of Europe Fortress and of the no-tolerance mentality. Parliaments need to do more than conclude that Dublin has failed. Parliaments need to take action, need to declare that it is a matter of credibility of our countries and of the European Union to protect those whose lives are at risk. We need to do more to ensure that tragedies in the Mediterranean happen never again. This is our responsibility, and to live up to this responsibility, we need also to fill the gaps of the executive power. We do well in calling upon states and in calling upon governments to take action, but it is our responsibility to take action ourselves. I believe the Rome Declaration issued 3 weeks ago and the declaration to be issued by our Assembly is a show of responsibility. I also believe we should envisage ways of more active taking of responsibility. Let me make a few very, very short points which I believe we should consider to include in our declaration. Point one is that combating smuggling and combating human trafficking should never be pursued through means which may endanger the lives of those innocent. It is not acceptable to envisage collateral damages in the fight against smuggling. And this is a very, very important point to be made by parliaments, because unfortunately we have had an unacceptable death toll in the Mediterranean through operations considered to be of combating smuggling and trafficking. A second point is that the emphasis should be attributed to the fact that asylum is not an act of mercy. It's a human right of those who risk their lives in order to flee from situations and dangers for their lives and their liberty. And it's also an obligation of the states who receive them. A third point is that we should talk frankly about those who are willing to risk their lives in order to save their lives. The people who are willing to go through the Mediterranean through very, very unsafe circumstances and accepting the possibility of dying, they are not migrants, they are refugees. And we should talk about it very, very openly and very frankly. And a fourth and final point is that we should talk about racism and xenophobia, which have been raised through a very systematic danger talk about immigration or refugee flows. The real danger is nourishing racism and xenophobia. And it is a responsibility of parliaments to raise awareness against this danger. It is a responsibility of parliaments also to educate citizens and societies on human rights issues, humanitarian law issues, humanitarianism issues. Thank you.
Τη διακήρυξη της διάσκεψης υιοθέτησε ο Πρωθυπουργός της Πορτογαλίας Πάσος Κοέλιο, ο οποίος απίφθινε χαιρετισμό με το πέρας των εργασιών, ενώ τους Προέδρους των Κοινοβουλίων υποδέχθηκε το απόγευμα ο Πρόεδρος της Πορτογαλικής Δημοκρατίας Ανιμπάλ Καβάκο Σίλβα, στον οποίο επιδόθηκε η διακήρυξη για να την υιοθετήσει και αυτός με τη σειρά του. Στο περιθώριο της διάσκεψης, η κυρία Κωνσταντοπούλου πραγματοποίησε επαφές με τους ομολόγους της, τους οποίους ενημέρωσε για τις πρωτοβουλίες του Ελληνικού Κοινοβουλίου, με ιδιαίτερη έμφαση στην Επιτροπή Αλήθειας Δημοσίου Χρέους και στην Επιτροπή Διεκδίκησης Γερμανικών Οφειλών. Ενέργειες τις οποίες δημοσιοποίησε και κατά τις συνεντεύξεις τις οποίες παραχώρησε, μεταξύ άλλων, στο ειδησιογραφικό πρόγραμμα της δημόσιας πορτογαλικής τηλεόρασης RTP1 και στο πορτογαλικό πρακτορείο ειδήσεων Λούσα.
Under the rules of procedure of the Parliament to establish a committee, an experts committee, to audit the Greek debt. So to look into the reasons why this debt was created, how it was created, by whom, how it was blown up, and what portion of the debt is legitimate and which part of it is illegitimate and odious. It is obvious that we have, to a large extent, an illegitimate, illegal, unsustainable and odious debt. And it's a question for Europe how this problem will be handled, because it's not a problem of Greece alone. Portugal has a debt problem. Italy has a debt problem. Many countries are facing debt problems, and parts of these debts are not for granted. This committee has started work a few days ago. It is a committee of experts on human rights, on constitutional law, on debt, on public debt, and on UN procedures. And I believe its work is going to be very, very fruitful and very, very useful for democracy in Europe. Another committee which we established, and that is a parliamentary committee constituted by members of parliament from all parties, is the committee to promote and demand the restitutions for crimes committed by the Nazi occupation in Greece during the Second World War, and to also demand the paying back of the obligatory loan taken by the Nazis from the Bank of Greece, to demand also the return of the stolen archaeological treasures and the restitutions and reparations for the destructions in the public infrastructures in the whole country. This is a committee which was created pursuant to my proposal as president, but which has a history. During the previous period, we have had an emblematic figure who is now a member of the European Parliament, Manolis Glezos, a living hero for Greece, the man who, when he was only 19 years old during the Nazi occupation, took down the Nazi flag from the Acropolis. He is the leading figure of this claim for many, many years in Greece. It was under his persistence that this committee, its predecessor committee was founded during the previous parliamentary period, and during this period we have upgraded it because it's now presided by the President of the Parliament and co-chaired by all the vice presidents of the Parliament, in order to demonstrate that the Parliament considers these restitutions a central issue for the Greek people. And indeed, it's a very, very important ethical, historical, but also substantial issue. We still have survivors from the crimes committed against the Greek population, who resisted very, very vividly and very, very courageously and heroically. So it's really a question of doing justice to those victims, but also to honoring the resistance.
I do not believe that there will be anyone who would like to argue that a whole people or a whole society should pay what is not owed. We have not heard this kind of argument up to now, and I'm very confident we're not going to hear this kind of argument. On the other hand, we should hear about how the debt was created and blown out of proportion in many countries. As you know, in Greece, the crisis started and the memoranda started with the public debt amounting to around 120% of GDP. Right now, it exceeds 180%. In your country, the memoranda started with the debt amounting to 90%, and right now it has gone to 130%. These are sums that the next generations are called upon to pay, and we have to take responsibility, and we have to be clear about what we're asking them to pay. A very big part of our debt is due to corruption deals, such as the deals with Siemens or with the armaments companies. It is important that transparency is guaranteed. It is important that light is shed upon those cases and that accountability is ensured. Right now, in the Greek Parliament, we're reopening both the Siemens case, which is a major corruption case involving both parties which have governed Greece for the last 40 years, and the Lagarde list case, which is a major tax evasion and money laundering case involving state officials. I would say that corruption in Greece, contrary to what has been the public propaganda, corruption in Greece has involved the very, very high officials, both in government and in the state, not the people. And it is important that we really combat corruption, and it is important on a European level that we enforce the anti-corruption clauses, which include remuneration of the state by corrupt companies.
Απαντώντας σε σχετική ερώτηση, η κυρία Κωνσταντοπούλου είπε ότι εκπλήσεται με τις επεμβάσεις ξένων κυβερνητικών αξιωματούχων στις δημοκρατικές διαδικασίες της χώρας και ότι οι κόκκινες γραμμές δεν είναι της κυβέρνησης, αλλά των πολιτών.
These red lines are not ours to break. These red lines are the red lines of the Greek people who gave an unequivocal mandate to end the austerity policies and to end the memoranda. We're not entitled and we have no right to bargain on what is not ours. And this has to be very, very clear. Mm-hmm. It also has to be clear that if it's asked of Greece, of the Greek parliament or of the Greek government to trespass what is the very content of the mandate given to us, then this is a direct violation of the democratic rule. Mm-hmm. It is a question of democracy. It's not a question of economy. And there is absolutely no provision in any European convention. There is absolutely no framework which would entitle any other government or any institutional representative or any institution of the European Union to enter into the internal democratic procedures. This is what was done during the memoranda period, and this is what is unacceptable and which should be absolutely prohibited in a democratic union of states.
Αναφερόμενη στα κύματα των προσφύγων, κατά τη συνέντευξη στο RTP1, η πρόεδρος της Βουλής είπε ότι οι ηγέτες θα πρέπει να πάρουν την ευθύνη να σταματήσουν οι πόλεμοι.
Before going to speeches, we should go to the writings. We should go what is there, what is an acquis, an international acquis, an international basis that we all have to respect. The Geneva Conventions on Asylum and on humanitarian law are there for decades, and we do have to respect them. On the other hand, we do have to eliminate the reasons of refugee flows, and this means taking up responsibility for eliminating wars around the globe.
Την επόμενη μέρα, η πρόεδρος της Βουλής πήρε μέρος μαζί με την ελληνική αντιπροσωπεία βουλευτών στην 11η Ολομέλεια της Κοινοβουλευτικής Συνέλευσης της Ένωσης για τη Μεσόγειο, προωθώντας το διάλογο και την ανταλλαγή απόψεων μεταξύ βουλευτών σε σχέση με τους στόχους της Ευρωμεσογειακής Συνεργασίας. Συνέλευση που απαρτίζεται από 5 μόνιμες επιτροπές, οι οποίες συζητούν ζητήματα ανθρωπίνων δικαιωμάτων, οικονομικά, κοινωνικά, εκπαιδευτικά, ενεργειακά, περιβαλλοντικά, αλλά και θέματα που αφορούν στα δικαιώματα των γυναικών στις ευρωμεσογειακές χώρες.
Thank you, Mrs. President, and thank you very much for having taken the initiative to organize this absolutely successful meeting. I believe it's very important to make sure that each and every one of us takes the declaration of speakers issued yesterday on human rights and immigration in the Mediterranean and makes sure that the executive powers of our country do adopt and do go forward with these formulations and with these recommendations. It is also important to stress that when it comes to immigration, when it comes to protecting human rights and the rights of the refugees and immigrants in the Mediterranean, it is very important to know that dangers for human rights and for human lives very, very often stem from policies undertaken in order to protect the so-called Europe Fortress Europe. It is very important to stress that those who undertake to secure the borders are obliged to protect human rights. It is very important to see to it that operations are very, very closely monitored, that the principle of non-refoulement is very closely respected, and that no collateral damages, no human lives are lost in the process of the operation to combat smuggling. This is an amendment made yesterday to our common declaration, and I believe this is also a reformulation to be inserted in the relevant recommendation of the committee. It is important to exclude the possibility to have any life loss in the process of combating criminality. It is important to ensure that due process, human rights and humanitarian law is respected at all instances. It is important to remind ourselves that Europe is all about protecting human lives, human rights and human dignity.
Έγινε ιδιαίτερη συζήτηση για το μεταναστευτικό και για το παλαιστινιακό στην Επιτροπή Πολιτικών Υποθέσεων. Και είναι σοβαρό αυτό με την έννοια ότι υπήρχαν τροπολογίες, ότι η αιτία, ας πούμε, και της μεταναστευτικής ροής και των προσφυγικών ροών είναι οι πόλεμοι και μια διένεξη που υπάρχει τόσα χρόνια Ισραήλ-Παλαιστίνη, και η μη εγκαθίδρυση Παλαιστινιακού κράτους δυσκολεύει αυτό το πράγμα με βάση τις αποφάσεις του ΟΗΕ φυσικά, και έγινε πολλή κουβέντα στην Επιτροπή Πολιτικών Υποθέσεων για το θέμα αυτό σαν μια αιτία πολέμων, εντάσεων που οδηγούν και σε προσφυγικές ροές. Από την άλλη μεριά βέβαια εμείς βάλαμε τα ζητήματα ότι πρέπει και αυτό φάνηκε και από τις αποφάσεις που πήρε και η Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση τελικά μετά τη Σύνοδο Κορυφής, να ενισχύσει και τις χώρες υποδοχής, τις χώρες στο Νότο, δηλαδή Ισπανία, Πορτογαλία, Ιταλία, Μάλτα, Ελλάδα, που δεχόμαστε και τις κύριες ροές τις προσφυγικές. Απ' την άλλη μεριά να υπάρχει και μια βοήθεια σε ανθρωπιστικό επίπεδο από την άλλη πλευρά όσον αφορά την Αφρική παραδείγματος χάριν, έτσι, και από εκεί και πέρα να γίνει μια, αν θέλετε, κατανομή των προσφυγικών αυτών ροών και μέσα στα όρια της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης, ανάλογα με το... να υπάρχει μια κατανομή αντίστοιχη. Δεν μπορεί η Ελλάδα, η Μάλτα και η Ισπανία να δέχονται τις κύριες ροές και να έχουν όλα αυτά τα προβλήματα τα οποία έχουν δημιουργηθεί. Να λάβουν υπόψη και η διεθνής κοινότητα αλλά και οι χώρες της Μεσογείου τον παράγοντα κλιματική αλλαγή, και με αυτό θα κλείσω, γιατί έχουμε ήδη κλιματικούς μετανάστες και όσο οξύνεται το πρόβλημα της κλιματικής αλλαγής θα είναι αθρώες οι προσελεύσεις προσφύγων, κλιματικών προσφύγων. Το θέμα τώρα των ανανεώσιμων πηγών ενέργειας είναι το μέλλον. Το θέμα είναι πώς γίνονται, πώς εγκαθίστανται αυτές οι ανανεώσιμες πηγές ενέργειας. Δηλαδή αυτό που συμβαίνει στην Ελλάδα, να μην έχουμε γεωργική γη καλλιεργήσιμη και να την έχουμε φυτέψει με φωτοβολταϊκά, εντάξει, σαν πολιτεία πρέπει να δεις το μέσο όρο και τι πρέπει να κάνεις, γιατί έχεις και υποχρεώσεις όσον αφορά τις ΑΠΕ, ενώ διεθνώς αλλά και όσον αφορά το μέλλον του πλανήτη, έτσι. Γενικότερα εμείς ως ΣΥΡΙΖΑ και βέβαια και η κυβέρνηση που ο πυρήνας της είναι ο ΣΥΡΙΖΑ, μιλάμε για επέκταση των φωτοβολταϊκών, των αιωλικών, των ανανεώσιμων γενικά μορφών ενέργειας. Υπάρχουν και άλλες, γεωθερμία, βιομάζα, βιοαέριο που είπα πριν κλπ. Αλλά σε μικρές, όχι οι τεράστιες, ας πούμε, οι βιομηχανικές, ακριβώς. Να λαμβάνουν υπόψη και την περιοχή φυσικά, να επεκταθούν σε πρώτη φάση, αν θέλετε, στα δημόσια κτίρια. Δεν είναι ένα ζήτημα, σχολεία, τα πάντα, να γίνουν ενεργειακά αυτόνομα. Και ένα θέμα τώρα, μια και είπαμε, ή άλλες μορφές συνεταιριστικές, μικρότερης κλίμακας, να το πω απλά.
3 κεφάλαια είχε η θεματολογία στην Επιτροπή αυτή. Ήταν οι οικονομικές επιπτώσεις από τη μετανάστευση στην Μεσόγειο, οι δραστηριότητες που πρέπει να προστατευτούν και τα προγράμματα που πρέπει να προωθηθούν στον χώρο, και ένα τρίτο ιδιαίτερο για τον τουρισμό. Ειδικά για το πρώτο, για τις οικονομικές επιπτώσεις, ας τα πω όλα μαζί για να συντομεύουμε. Αν ήθελα να ξεχωρίσω κάποια σημεία από την όλη συζήτηση, ήταν ότι δόθηκε βάρος στις επιπτώσεις που θα έχει μετανάστευση και στο δημογραφικό, στο ότι δημιουργείται μία ή δύο γενιές, δημιουργείται ένα κενό στις γενιές, ένα κενό γενναίων, με τη μετανάστευση στις χώρες που φεύγουν, δηλαδή που φεύγει ο κόσμος, όπως επίσης δημιουργούνται προβλήματα πολιτιστικά, προβλήματα ακόμα και δικαιωμάτων των εργαζομένων, που όλα αυτά πρέπει να προστατευτούν και να ειδωθούν. Ειδικά για τον τουρισμό προβλήθηκε ειδικά ο τουρισμός προβλήθηκε σαν ένας τρόπος, ένα θέμα, ένας δρόμος για συνεργασία των χωρών της Μεσογείου, ώστε να δοθεί κάποια ανάπτυξη για να αντιμετωπιστεί σε έναν βαθμό το ζήτημα το μεταναστευτικό. Και τελειώνω με καθοριστική παρέμβαση που υπήρχε από τις περισσότερες χώρες της Μεσογείου, στις οποίες ήμασταν και εμείς, ότι το πρόβλημα το μεταναστευτικό δεν είναι των χωρών της Μεσογείου, αλλά είναι ένα ευρύτερο θέμα το οποίο πρέπει να το δουν όλοι και να μην κλείνουν τα μάτια, που δυστυχώς φάνηκε και σε αυτή την συνέλευση, ότι πολλές χώρες είτε αδιαφορούν ή κοιτάζουν πώς να προστατεύσουν τα σύνορά τους για να μην έχουν μετανάστες. Και φυσικά αναφέρουμε στις βόρειες χώρες. Όλα αυτά πρέπει όχι μόνο να μεταφερθούν στα όργανα που παίρνουν τις αποφάσεις, αλλά πρέπει να πιέσουμε και σε αυτά για να γίνουν πράξη. Γιατί όπως υπήρχαν πολύ χαρακτηριστικές τοποθετήσεις από αγανακτισμένους εκφραστές κοινωνιών της Μεσογείου, ιδιαίτερα της Βόρειας Αφρικής, ότι έχουμε κουραστεί από λόγια και θέλουμε πράξεις.
Η κυρία Κωνσταντοπούλου συναντήθηκε και με την Καταρίνα Μάρτινς, συντονίστρια του Πορτογαλικού Μπλόκο της Αριστεράς και στελέχη του κόμματος, ενώ αντάλλαξε απόψεις με τον ιδρυτή του Μπλόκο, τον καθηγητή οικονομικών και συγγραφέα βιβλίων πάνω στην πορεία της οικονομικής σκέψης, Φρανσίσκο Λουόσα, ο οποίος ενημερώθηκε και για τη σύσταση επιτροπών οι οποίες σχετίζονται με το ελληνικό χρέος.
It was a very interesting discussion on the current and very urgent matters of the economy, but also on European policy with respect to Greece. I had the chance to inform Professor Losa on the recent initiatives of the Greek Parliament, the Hellenic Parliament, on the Debt Truth Committee, which is going to decodify the Greek debt and see which part of it is illegitimate, illegal, unsustainable and odious. I asked for his support in this procedure, which is very important not only for the Greek people, but also for the Portuguese people and the European people in general. Portugal has big public debt as well. The people of Portugal do have an interest in following this discussion and this procedure very, very closely, because we have a very good reason to believe that decodifying and auditing the Greek debt will reveal aspects of the creation and the blowing out of proportion of the debt in Europe in general. I had also the chance to invite Professor Losan to Greece for the weeks to come in order for the Greek citizens to have the chance to appreciate his take and his thesis on the matters of debt.
Let me say it's a pleasure to listen to the President of the Parliament. Of course, you know that Greece is the capital of Europe nowadays. So if there is a fight against austerity with a social authority of democracy, that's what's happening in Greece. So Greece is helping Europe to look to the core elements of democracy, responsibility, contract, and clarifying the financial pressure and blackmail against the countries, against the pensions, against the wages, against employment, against young people, against our common living and respect, it's absolutely essential. So in Portugal there was a very enthusiastic reception for the victory of the new government in Greece, and I believe so. The same happened in Spain or in Italy or in France. And of course we follow very attentively what's happening with all the negotiations and all the dealings with Europe. We feel the difficulty, we feel the pressure, we feel the need for a solution. So, well, I got from the President a lot of very useful information and sense of the reality of what's happening in Greece. And of course, the Greek Parliament has an enormous responsibility for deciding on behalf of the Greek people. So I hope that what's happening in the last weeks and in last months can be very rapidly overcome through a concrete solution which respects the right of the Greek people to decide on investment, on the public goods, on the sustainability of its own country. And I guess that's a very good lesson for Europe. We need that solution, and Europe needs it. Otherwise, it will be the dictatorship of debt, the dictatorship of the financial markets, meaning that a very small part of the society will get it all and will explore. The older people, the younger people, men and women who work and make all their lives for their countries, and they will not have the respect of the common good democratic means we should have. The memoranda of the Troika, which were almost all the same writing in Greece and in Portugal, it's almost the same wording and the same social and economic orientation. So it was to decrease the GDP. Well, one of my colleagues gives an example which is a wonderful, simple one. Imagine a country which has a huge debt, 100, and a GDP of 100. So the debt is 100%. But and someone comes and proposes to solve the problem of the very big weight of debt, reducing the GDP. And the GDP through austerity and recession goes to 50. So it's half of what it was. And now the ratio, the weight of the debt on GDP becomes the double, 200%. Only the idiot of the village would propose such a solution. And the idiot of the village is the Troika, and is the ECB, and it's the European Commission, the IMF. That's what they've been doing to Europe and to Greece and to Portugal with different levels. But we have all been losing a lot because the countries are poorer, they have much more unemployment, and if an economy is something, it's a part of the society. So it should be measured not by the financial rents, not by the financial benefits, not by the financial extortion, but by employed people. People having the means to live with dignity their lives, and to feed their children, and to respect the elder. And that's what is being lost in Europe. That's why the debt investigation in Greece, the first one in Europe, it's so important. It's so important to have the concrete details, the technical authority of this sort of investigation, and to have as well the example of what a state concerned about the citizens can do, should do, and is doing in the case of Greece.
The responsibility is always an inspiration, not a burden. And this is how it should be for politicians and for people who undertake to guarantee a better world and a better life for their co-citizens. I would say it's very interesting to see that there have been investigations committees for relevant issues in several parliaments. There have been initiatives, not debt auditing initiatives, but initiatives towards transparency and accountability and serving the right of the people to truth are there. And I also guess it's easier for parliamentarians and for parliaments to better serve the people than for the executive branch. At this point, I believe that this is a responsibility which falls upon parliaments. It's a responsibility to support what has been the founding goal of the European Union, the prosperity of its people and of its societies, to support also the right of all people to live with dignity within the European Union. There is a very, very strong impression that there exist political powers in Europe who would like to see the isolation of one or more European societies. These political powers are acting in a grossly anti-European manner. And this should be said loud and clear, and parliaments in Europe are those entitled to say this. I think the process will be completed and any obstacles will be overcome. There are no obstacles that can't be overcome when you're willing, and we are.
No, well, I have no advice. I feel it's a very good initiative. There were some cases of audit at an international level, but nothing comparable to the burden, to the effort, to what's being done in Greece. Because this is the core of the European management which is being discussed. And it's very important to understand how the financial markets work. We all can learn very important lessons from what will happen from the research and the fact-finding in Greece. And all the implications it has is to respond to the essential question of democracy, the power for the people and the decision for the people and that transparency, so that people can learn and know which are exactly the difficulties we have. Nobody is saying that it will be easy to come out of the European crisis or the Greek crisis or the Portuguese crisis, but knowing exactly the constraints and exactly the problems, exactly the responsibilities, exactly who created how they were created, it's very important in order to solve the problem. So that's an immense step towards truth and towards respect for the people. So I believe that democracy is again living in Athens through this work.